What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. This week's guest, Dr. Michaelene Ruhl, is a psychologist and expert in psychedelic integration. And what I wanted to do with Dr. Michaelene, this week is share my experience. I actually went through a psychedelic experience for the first time ever. I've never smoked a joint. I was, straight laced kid or whatever, and had found my way to wanting to explore, I guess, my consciousness and explore reality for that matter. So I went through for myself I guess, a mushroom ceremony, a psilocybin ceremony, where I ate 5 grams of mushrooms and then went to a place I'd never been before. What Dr. Michaelene Ruhl does is when somebody goes through that experience, she will help that person maybe understand, answer questions, and all of that based on the research she's done in this field. And I'm going to actually just open up and share what my experience was and let her maybe guide me through, and hopefully it helps many of you, what that was and how it's helped me unlock some things in my life that I honestly didn't expect it would. So, Dr. Michaelene Ruhl, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
No, it's great to have you. It's great to have you. So let's start with this. So, what is I kind of explained it a bit, but what does an expert in psychedelic integration mean? What is psychedelic integration? What do you do in that regard?
So, the integration process is really about weaving what you've learned on that journey, that special ceremony that you went through, and weaving it into your life. And so, because during those journeys, what will happen is that people see all these different things, they release, they then are able to see, okay, here's my next steps. And the important thing is to actually take action on those steps. And that's what integration really helps to do, is to start to take the action that you need to essentially live what you learned. Because people do these journeys to expand themselves, to learn more about themselves, to get in touch with places that they can't in this state of consciousness. And so to be able to then make that conscious, which is part of the integration, we talk about it. What did you experience? What were you shown? And then they take that and are able to weave that in their life. So it's like, oh, wait, I have a boss that treats me X way. And this is what I learned. I went back to the time when I was bullied and realized that, this is why it's triggering me. Now, what can I do? And how can I heal that part from way back to come and bring it into my life now? So it really shows you all the challenging things in your life, but also the joy and bliss as well.
So so I know a bunch of guys then when they're 22 years old they trip on shrooms, right? It's kind of a
Mm.
common saying or whatever. What's the difference between that where it's just like, and the people that come to you who have gone through this, like how is there a distinction between, like, are you just doing mushrooms and getting high and whatever? Like how are they seeing or having experiences that they then need to figure out how to integrate into their life? What's the difference between 22-year-old at a party and me, 40-year-old dude who goes to experience something maybe outside of his normal consciousness?
Well, the biggest thing is that when you do it recreationally, there's no intention set. It's really about setting and setting. And so when you do it with a therapeutic piece in mind, the set and setting is very important. It's very sacred. You're usually, and I hope that you're with someone you trust that will, sit for you and be there for you and who's sober as well. Usually when you do it when you're 20 something and are at a rave or something, it's nobody's sober and everyone's, what they call tripping. I don't call it tripping because in that sacred space, it's not. It's really very much a ceremony. So that would be the biggest difference, is that set and setting. The other thing is, normally when you're out there doing it recreationally, nobody is there to integrate with you. You may have had, people call them bad trips. Really, they're not. They're part of the healing process. But when you're out there and you're looking just to have fun and then this happens, it's very scary. And so there's no one there for people to, to lean on and say, whoa, what is happening? This is what I'm experiencing right now. So those are the biggest thing. There's no one there to kind of protect you and watch over you and guide you. So it's not very therapeutic at all. It's just going to have a good time. And it can turn out kind of wrong per se, because, the psilocybin has a spirit to it. And so the spirit of the mushroom can be like, this is not proper. So I might, they're also known as tricksters. And so um, the biggest thing is please don't, please don't do it recreationally, at least that much, right? When you have people taking as much as you experience, it's very, very different. I'm sure you didn't feel like you could get up and walk around and,
No, no, and it's yeah, as you said, the intention had to be there because otherwise, and I'll talk about my experience here in a little bit, and I'll share with you. But Mike, for me, yeah, it would have been a bad trip if it was just like I was out to have fun. I could see that. I've never done that before, but it took a dark turn for me at one point, and I want to get into that with you and get your feelings and not even feelings, but your advice and help me integrate that.
Mhm.
But yeah, like the I could see that bad trip element if you're around a bunch of people with the intention of having fun, and this thing is showing you this spirit, the psilocybin, the mushroom is showing you something that you need to see. Yeah, that would be a little bit scary.
Mhm.
Um, so give me some history on this from your perspective. So you're obviously researching psychedelics, the history of them. I come from the 80s with Nancy Reagan and Don't Do Drugs, and I did Dare in first grade or whatever, right? Like, so this
Mhm.
stuff is to me, especially when I first heard of it, and just for context, where I first heard of the idea of psychedelics was probably like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, those guys are those guys, right? But then as I got around in Abundance, I got around a bunch of guys that are probably at the higher level of financial success who have a very big life. It was interesting to me how many of those folks would talk about psilocybin, MDMA, ayahuasca, LSD, these things, as I say them out loud, it's like what a bunch of rich guys and their designer drugs kind of thing, but not using them just to go party and have fun and raves in Vegas, but how they use them therapeutically with intention to expand their consciousness. One guy called it a second opinion on reality, which was awesome. I love that
Mhm.
phrasing. That's a great, great phrasing. So for me, I got exposed to it through that, and then it was just sort of like I researched. I read. There's a book, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, I think it is. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of research on this. But for those who are maybe hearing this for the first time, like, dude, I listen to your podcast and it's cool. You talk to these, really rich people about how they invested in this or invested in that. Like, where are you going here? Can you give a little bit of the science, if you would, or the backstory on
Mhm.
psychedelics from however far back you think it needs to go to kind of shape the story?
Well, yeah, I mean, it started thousands of years ago, to be honest, where, indigenous peoples began using it in their own ceremonies to enlighten themselves, to, for lack of a better description, level up, and in their very, very sacred ceremonies. And even so much, they would use it to, and we don't have this in the US, unfortunately, when someone comes of age, right? You have a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, or a quinceañero, but in the United States, we don't have certain things like that. And back in the indigenous peoples, they would use it for those kinds of ceremonies as well. And so it's not that it's this is a brand new thing. It's just a new thing here. And back in the 80s, I grew up in the 80s too. Um, just say no and all that good stuff. I was a part of Dare for a little bit as well. But what I've come to realize through all the research and whatnot is this is truly plant medicine. They use these plants for medicinal purposes. And to me, the whole illegalization of it all was very political. It was a political move, and it wasn't, and for various reasons. But there was research back then, right, in the 60s and 70s about all these different things that you mentioned, especially psilocybin, LSD, and MDMA wasn't quite there yet, but it was helping people. And they were realizing, wow, psychologically, this could really help people to microdose to do these certain things. And then it became illegal, and boom, all of the research was dropped. But MAPS and Rick Dobin, he's been doing this for 10 years now, trying to get the FDA to approve his thing, his MDMA treatments, psilocybin treatments, and even cannabis treatments for especially veterans and PTSD. And they have found they have paperwork years and years now. And now they're, I believe, in the third tier of their clinical trial which is basically they could be approved as soon as next year or the year after, to use this treatment legally. And so that is exciting. And then the one fear that I have is now the pharmaceutical companies are going to try to figure out how to come and take this plant. Because to me, what the pharmaceutical companies give us are drugs,
Yeah.
and what these are, these plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin and San Pedro and all those different things are medicines. And so I kind of have the different view, the flip view of that. And just seeing people in my practice, who come to see me for the integration pieces, um, their growth, their awareness, their ability to then kind of shift the depression, shift the anxiety symptoms, and things like that have been amazing. And that's what the studies have been showing through MAPS and some other places like Johns Hopkins and things like that, is that, wow, this is really helpful for those people, who drugs or the pharmaceutical, medications aren't working quite as well for,
Makes sense.
because it works with your body. Um, there's natural things in your body. It's more natural. It's a plant. And one of the cool things is not only can it shift your consciousness, you go into another state of consciousness, but also physiologically, it works on the connections in your brain as well. And so there's just so many benefits. It also helps with pain, um, and that
Well,
kind of thing.
even addiction, if I'm not mistaken, right? I
Yes.
think we talk about, oh, well, I'm a recovering addict, whatever the drug might be, cocaine,
Hmm.
alcohol. So I can't do something like, and each to each their own. I mean, this isn't to
Right.
advise anybody who's an addict on what they should or shouldn't do, but in my research, me reading about this, it was a lot of people who have addiction issues actually use this, because I don't believe, from what I've seen in the research, that there are any addictive properties with, say, a psilocybin. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. That's accurate. There are no physiological addictions. Some people might get addicted to the spirituality piece of
Sure.
it,
Yeah.
the being
I
able
think
to
I am. Yeah.
travel. Yeah, but there are no physical addictions to it.
Yeah.
And especially with psilocybin, there are no overdose worries. You can take too much, and then you'll just be way, way, way out, and it defeats the whole purpose. But you can't. There is no overdose of it
Interesting.
to
Yeah,
where
that makes
it would
sense.
kill
That makes
you.
sense.
Mhm.
Wow. So, all right. And if I remember right, I think I read even back to the 30s, there was research produced, but is
Yeah.
it like dried up in the 60s because of the bad look of the hippie movement? Is that kind of the
Yeah, it was the political thing. It was, the hippies. I mean, and I think I totally would have been a hippie back then. The hippies were about, wake up, see what's going on. Look, all that's happening is not such a good thing, right? They were able to see these different things, and I think part of the reason it was illegal was because
yeah.
people were going, hey, no, this is freeing. This is, we get to say, we get to take action and things like that. And so I
Yeah.
think that worried the politicos of
Yeah, yeah,
the.
yeah. And they dried it up, but it's coming back. A lot of states are legalizing, counties are legalizing, not even like decriminalizing, call it.
Mhm.
And I think there's a massive movement with that, which is good to see. So,
Yeah.
look, I found you because after I went through this experience, I wanted to go through an integration, and we chatted a bit after I did mine, which was very helpful. And I asked you at that point, hey, do you mind coming on? Because I'd love to share this. That's just kind of my thing. And I learned that even more, honestly, in my experience, that the authentic me likes this. I like to share what's going on to help others. That's the best use of me. The intention I set was exactly that. It was, how do I become the best version of myself, or what's better yet, what's blocking me from becoming the best version of myself, whatever that means. So if you're okay, I want to dive in and just talk about
Yeah.
my experience. And like, as somebody who's worked with me on the integration side, I'll say this on video, like full rights to share
Mhm.
anything that I shared with you in our call or whatever, right? So
Okay.
full rights to share everything you want to. So yeah, so for me, I set this intention.
Hmm.
I ate these, I had mushrooms. I ate the mushrooms. They tasted like paper.
Hmm.
And then, about an hour into after that experience, I went into sort of okay, something's foggy here. I laid down. I had a kind of like what do you call it? Like a sleep mask on,
Mm-hmm.
and I just went someplace, right? It was unbelievable the depths I went to. And again, the intention the whole time for me was what's blocking me from becoming the best version of myself. What sticks out, and there was a lot, this is a little bit ago now, there was a lot of things, but what jumps out to me that happened was that it went like instantly dark. And I don't mean dark physically, but
Mm-hmm.
dark, for lack of a better phrase, almost demonically. It felt like this negative, heavy, devil-like energy. I didn't see, well, maybe I did a little bit, there's some imagery, but it wasn't like, some guy walked up to me with a tail and a pitchfork, but it felt
Right.
like that kind of energy that started really pulling
Mm-hmm.
me in particular. And I shared this with you, to my left. Like I remember being like, my body, my head, everything was almost like being gripped and dragged to my left. And I was doing everything I could not to let that happen. Right. I was
Mm-hmm.
doing everything I could to not allow that, because it was like, whoa, this is the bad trip. This is the thing that puts me in the nut house, right? Like I'm going to be that guy, arms folded, like shouting out crazy things for the rest of my life, never see my wife and kids again, because I'm about to go into some evil place, right? Like that's what it felt
Right.
like to me. Help me, and for those listening, and you've helped me on this, help me understand what that is, what that feel is, this draw to the left. If you could just sort of, you hear that, what comes to your mind as somebody who's done integrations for people who have had this experience before?
Yeah, so one of the first things that come to mind is the left side is the feminine. And so that speaks a little bit like how do you treat women? How did you treat your mother? How about your feminine side? Do you allow that to come out? Because we have both sides in us. And if it's unbalanced, then we get little hits like this and like, and if I remember correctly, I remember you said it feels sinister. It feels
Yeah.
like and and what comes to mind too is the way you described it was, oh, and how about this ego? What
Mm,
is it that draws, like that drives this heaviness and this, because our egos or our human parts of us, we change is not necessarily great, right? Because that puts us in a vulnerable position and our ego goes, no, we're not, no, no, no. And so I think too that it can also present itself like, you don't want to do this.
mm,
This is not safe. No, look, feel the low vibration of it because energetically it's a low vibration. It can be. And
yeah.
so for you, it was that piece of do I look? Do I not want to look? What's here? Why is this so sinister? Why is this, a little bit scary? Well, how is this affecting me in my everyday life? And so those were the first things that come to mind is like, the feminine side. How are you treating women? How is your ego affecting your connection with women, with your mom, with your, sisters, whoever you have, with even, coworkers or cohorts or colleagues, you know, and to kind of look at that and to say, so tell me about that. How is that?
Yeah,
How is that for
that
you?
and I'll talk about that because that was something I reflected on quite a bit. Um, I wanted to ask you a bit about the ego in
Hmm.
this regard as well, because I think the way I interpreted it was that sinister, that dark, or whatever was essentially the ego coming out and saying, "Hey, I want to play here. Like, I haven't gotten the attention that I need or deserve or whatever, right?" And it came at me hard, and it tried to pull me, but I didn't. I wasn't allowed. I was doing everything I could not to.
Hmm.
Why? In your experience, why was I not allowing this thing to take me? Yeah, let me tell you let me take it back. I was scared. I was literally scared I would never see my family again. Like that, I
Yeah.
felt that way. Like I remember thinking metaphorically, but almost physically, like I have to grip on over here to this light that I associated with my wife, my boys, my two kids.
Hmm.
So this thing can't take me any further than I'm going to allow it to. So when I said that, what's your takeaway? What's your feeling as far as what I should be thinking about in that regard?
Well, so it's interesting, right? Because you're being pulled and you're trying your hardest, right? Because you have these two opposite. Oh, my love and light of my family and the pull of my ego, essentially.
Yeah.
And so how, and no, I like the light better. That's much better. I mean, the symbolism here is so rich.
Mm.
And to feel pulled by your ego and that sense of control, and like the ego's like, I want you, this is, this is what it is, no, we're over here. And I think there at that point too, the resistance was about, no, but look, it's so beautiful over there. Like, I have a new appreciation for what's for my family and my wife. Like, no, let me go over there. The challenge there is that ego will keep pulling on you
Yeah.
until you go, okay, let's get to know each other. Fine, I will pay attention to you because you have some gifts for me,
Mm.
some learnings, and so let me try to melt into that. But when you're resisting, you're fighting it all and you can't be present for the light anyway. So you're here and you're having this tug of
Wow.
war and you can't be present, right?
Yeah.
Because you're fighting here, but you're wanting and longing over here, and you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
And so the first place to go, because the light place will be there. And I know in that time it can be very scary that, like, no,
Am I
I'm
going
gonna,
to come back?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get enveloped and I'm gonna sit drooling here.
Right.
Um, and that's why it's good to have someone,
Sure.
with you in the room, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at that point, then to melt into it and say, okay, can you allow yourself to melt into it just a little bit?
Mm.
And the way you put, like, oh, it needs attention, like, I'm gonna go and feed it. Well, we all know that feeding your ego, depending, isn't all that great, right? Because you could just walk around and puff up. That's one way. The other way is to melt into it and say, okay, what do you have to teach me? What is it that I need to see right now or let go of right now so that I can be closer to my light source over there? And so part of that is, and I think you made mention a little bit earlier, is that control. So that whole thing was about control. You're standing firm and you're trying to control all of it. I'm trying to control the light. I'm trying to control the dark. I have trouble controlling me because I'm stuck now. And that gives you the illusion of control, but it really isn't control. It's like, I'm just here. Now what do I do? I'm afraid to go there, and that seems a little nervous too, but it feels so much better. But I can't go there without dropping this weight on my left side,
I never
right?
allowed myself to drop that weight. That's the thing. Like I explained this to you. I went through, and by the way, you're right. Having somebody there, I had somebody that I trusted very much there who had had this experience before that could really help guide me through it. So definitely recommend if anybody's thinking about this, do that. But I did not let, I like to say, because this person was helping me, with this a little bit like of trying to let go. Right. But I probably went like 80%. I like to think of it, if you could picture it, because this might be audio for you, like my hand is grabbing onto this light, if you will, and then I kind of Inspector Gadgeted my arm and let it extend further and further and got deeper in, and each layer that I went deeper, I had these high and low levels of like scared sadness and then giddiness once I kind of allowed myself there. But I feel like it was like digging to China, right? Like I didn't dig all the way. I didn't dig through to see the light on the other side, which is why I want to do this again and do another integration after that, so I can truly understand where I am. But I think for me, what you're saying is I needed to let fully, like, just let the hand go, not Inspector Gadget it, but fully let it go and just sort of trust fall, if you will, into this darkness, in some ways, and allow myself to see what's on the other side of that. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, it's less of the, that commercial that was like Nestea plunge and you
Yeah,
fell
yeah,
backward. It's less about that, and it can be more gentle.
yeah.
With the Inspector Gadget arm, it was a little bit gentle, right?
Right.
But you can actually control that within the journey of, like, okay, please let this be gentle. I'm just going to take one step at a time. Going 80% is huge. It's
Yeah.
80% farther than you went before, right?
True. Yeah.
And that last 20% is that, all right, I've trusted the process so far and myself, right? Because that's a big one. And I've let go of expectation. And now this last 20%, who, like, the first 80 was, was pretty challenging. What could be this last 20%? And what people generally find out is if they just allow themselves to kind of float into it and say, okay, please show me. and they have that person sitting with please show me, and just wait and listen. So it's less about grasping and running towards, and more about being in the state of receiving. And so that last 20% is really a lot about receiving, and okay, I'm ready to receive whatever message is here, knowing
This is
yeah.
this is where intention was helpful too, because I was able to remind myself of what it was, and the person that was there, kind of holding space for me, the same. Like I told them what my intention was, so they were like at times making sure I knew, because it's funny, like when they would speak up, I would wonder why they were in that moment, because I'm in another place, right? Like I'm in like a whole other world, even though my body's just sort of there. But
Hmm.
I remember being in these two states of consciousness, if you will. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but where
Hmm.
I'm digging down and mining into this ego, this darkness, this thing, and trying to figure out what's the lesson here. While simultaneously there's a person out there, right? Like that's watching,
Yeah.
and there, and that they were playing music. It was really something. It was really something else. It was amazing, to be honest with you. But they would say it, and then I would realize like my body was thrashing, like my feet were like pushing into the couch, and I was moving more than I realized. In fact, I was exhausted afterward. I had a headache. It was a physical as well as emotional experience for me, because my body wanted to control. Like every bit of me is trying to control. That's how I interpret it anyway, was trying to control this movement. And so every time I had to let go, I had to physically sort of grasp. I felt the need to physically grasp and thrash a little bit. Not as crazy.
Mhm.
It's thrash is a little bit of a crazy. I wasn't like all over the place, but
Right.
if you can imagine like somebody's pulling a tooth, right? Like that's what it was like you're pushing
Yeah.
into the couch, right? You're gripping and pushing. That's what it felt like, at least. And I didn't realize I was doing that until they said, "Hey, remember your remember your intention," that I could feel what I was doing. So anyway, that was a really interesting takeaway. And that is exactly it. Like, I feel like whatever I went, 70, 80%, I feel like now on my next one, I can go there knowing I'm safe there and allow myself to mine further. So I kind of like, I dug the hole, I climbed out. Oh, okay. I'm going to come back. And now, all right, I can jump right down to that level, I think, and dig further on the next experience that I have. So that's my plan. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good plan. That's a really good plan. And
It's
it normally,
control.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it normally does take 2 to 3 times to really be able to let yourself melt into that.
Yeah.
Because the first time, especially if you've never done anything like this before, it's like, whoa, what is happening to my body? And there is almost an instant sense of I'm losing control.
Yeah.
And so they try, people try to grip it. Like you said, that was a great description, great with the dentist chair.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but then once they experience once, usually they're like, okay, I want to do this again. I get it. I get it now. And I won't
Yep.
be so afraid.
That's
I've
kind of where I
learned.
am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having never done anything close to that's where I am. So I want to go back to the how you treat women and all of that. Cause
Hmm.
when you told me that in the integration session, I, I mean, maybe it's ego. It's like, what do you mean? I'm a good guy. I don't hit anybody. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? Maybe social conditioning or whatever. But when
Sure.
we unpacked it, um, I think well, I don't think I know where I went with it was in this when I did mushrooms and I was in in the ceremony, if you will. Um, there was a point at which I saw my sisters, and I think I explained to you, I don't have a great relationship with my sisters to this day.
Hmm.
They're older than me, and all of that, but I saw them for the first time as not like the people I see, the meat bag around them, if you will, like we all are, right? I didn't see them, but I saw this sort of tortured spirit. I don't know.
Hmm.
I know this is gonna. Some people are like, "What the heck is going on here?" But I did. I saw these sort of tortured souls, if you will, and I don't
Hmm.
mean tortured in any way that you would think of it, but more, when you say about my relationship with women, this is how I interpreted it. And I had an experience the day before that, looking back after, was like, wow, how I must have come across to my wife, right? So
Hmm.
I was raised, child of the 80s, as the boy, the youngest guy, the youngest kid in the family as well, to be breadwinner, provider, protector. You will get married, you will provide for wife and kids, almost implied like they can't. The wife can't. Wife has to take care of home. You take care of wife, kids. You be strong man. I don't know why I sound like a caveman, but that's kind of the way it sounded to me in my brain. My sisters were raised to become wives and mothers. I mean, that was always that. If they had a boyfriend, it was that the boyfriend needed to do this for them, do that for them. And then as they became adults and got married, it was like the husband will take care of you, right? So my posture toward women, I think, has been or had been, I
Mm-hmm.
need to protect, I need to provide for, I need to be in not in charge of, but like, I need to
Mm-hmm.
be the one who is strong kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize, and maybe this is some faction of the ego and denying it a little bit, which is why it jumped out at me as soon as I went into this
Mm-hmm.
process. But the day before, we had our house painted, and the painter told my wife that we needed a roof and it was going to be 15 grand. And he was convincing, at least to her, on needing the roof. Right. So she came in like, he's telling us we need a roof. Do we not do the painting? Do we pay for the roof just so we're, it's a lot of money or whatever? And I'm like, what do you mean we need a roof? So I went out, I asked the guy like 3 questions and debunked completely the need for the roof. Like he was obviously, it wasn't a good look for him. Right. It just wasn't. It was like, dude, roofs don't leak up, they leak from the top down. Like it was that simple, right? So I came in, like I just fulfilled my conditioning, man protected income, wife, right? I did all of that. And my wife didn't want to hear it. She's like, all right, just got to leave me alone. And what I learned in this session, like in that moment, is like, okay, whatever. But I did, but how I came across with me not, I guess I would say, I feel as though what I learned is my ego didn't get what it needed from my wife,
Mm-hmm.
right? My ego didn't get wow, you're such a big, powerful man, and you took care of us, yay! Like he didn't get that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like the rational side of me, if you will, might have been like, yeah, okay, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But what she must have seen from me, like
Mm-hmm.
actually in the middle of this, I ended up going to use the bathroom, and I saw my face in the mirror, and because I'm for lack of a better phrase, tripping, I saw almost like a sinister look on me. And that was like, oh my God, if this is the outward look, the posture I have for my wife, I never want her to see that. But that's the posture I'm sure I took that day. And I've
Mm-hmm.
taken specifically with women because I'm supposed to provide and protect, at least in some level. So that's my ramble. Does any of
Mm-hmm.
that make sense to you? How does that integrate as far as your perspective? Like when I say all of that with what you heard, does that make sense? Is it like, yeah, that's a rational reason for, or is it like, nah, I think you're missing the mark here a little bit on what that is?
No, no, yeah, I think it's I think it makes complete sense, especially since the way you grew up. Another modality I use is family constellations, and it's about the epigenetics. It's about generational cycles and patterns and traumas affecting, us today, especially if those before us couldn't couldn't heal their wounds, right? So it's up to us, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so that makes complete sense because it's in part in your DNA to protect, to watch over. This is what I saw my dad do. This is what how they treated my sister. So there was a bit of a double standard, right? And all that kind of stuff. So it makes complete sense that you bring it into your life this way. The big difference then can be, oh, now I can make a choice. I can still have that sense of protection, but I can present it a little bit better, right?
Mm.
So when we really see and you looked in that mirror and you went, oh, dang, you know, part of the action step and weaving it into your life is, okay, maybe I need to take a breath and say, how can I deliver this message with more loving kindness, or how my wife is going to hear it, as opposed to, this guy, he tried to scam you, blah, 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 I fixed it, and of course she's like, whatever. Being a woman, I'd be like, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah. Good for
Um,
you.
so, as opposed to, gosh, that guy, he really, I'm not sure he knows what he's talking about. He was talking about, the roof leaking up, and so I just asked him a couple questions, and we're not going to do it because we just really don't need it, you know. But the other way, it may have her feel like, oh, see, I know more than you. And again, that's part of her responsibility too, right? To communicate that. But it can come off as, it can come off as, for example, mansplaining, right? Or, the whole ego talk and the whole like, I know things, you don't know things, all this kind of stuff. So then at least you're now able to take a breath for a moment or feel it in your body, right? Like you looked in the mirror and I'm sure it posed something physical as well, like, oh, so when you feel that ramp up again, it's a good clue to be, oh, let me take a breath and see how I can maybe phrase it a little better than my first, non filtered way, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's yeah, that was for me a big takeaway. And I remember remember after I went through this, I was talking to my wife, and you're still kind of expanded for a while. Like it's not like it just, goes up and it comes down and you're fully sober, if you will.
Hmm.
You're definitely not where not in the middle of it where I saw what I saw in the mirror kind of thing. But
Hmm.
still, like I remember Googling it, like why can't I explain this? And I Googled that there are 172,000 words in the English language. I was like, well, that's why. There's not enough words to explain what I just went through, right? Like there's just no way to physically explain because a lot of this is happening in milliseconds, right? In real
Right.
time, if you will. Like a lot of these breakthroughs and epiphanies and these worries and concerns and hearing this person that was sitting in the room with me and it was all happening so simultaneously and almost like slow motion. It's like that movie Over the Hedge. You ever see that movie Over the Hedge?
Yeah.
Where the
Yeah.
where the squirrel drinks an energy drink and then like the whole world slows down
Slows
for him
down.
as he like
Yes. Yeah.
walks through the laser beams. It was like that in some ways, right? It was really just trippy, for lack of a better phrase. But trying to explain all of that afterward was so hard. The best thing
Mm.
that we did as a couple is my wife did it a month later, and then you did her integration for her after she went through that. And man, like, one, she had her own experience, which I won't get into. That's for her to get into. But the communication after my experience, I feel like I was communicating in a different way. And I
Mhm.
want to go back to the ego a bit in a second on this, but she also, having understood the experience I had, but then having her own experience, she and I have had the ability to really, you know what it did? You ever hear husbands and wives deal with this? My
Mhm.
wife, like, she asks the question and asks for a solution, but when I give her the solution, she says, I don't want your solution, I just wanted you to listen. Like that whole dynamic went away. Like I hear that from so many couples, right? Like, well,
Yes. Yes.
right, you asked me like what should I do, but no, I wasn't asking what I should do, what should I do. I was just wanted you to listen to me, and I always blew my mind like, no, you wanted a solution, but it removed that dynamic. And again, 170,000 words, I can't explain why or how. I
Right.
can't physically, maybe you can and I'll let you, but I can't physically explain how that happens. um but back to the ego piece for me. And tell me what you think of this, because I think I explained this to you as well. I feel like I always kept my ego over there because ego is bad, right? Like
Yeah.
don't let that thing become part of you. And I think
Mhm.
something I learned in this was like all of me physically, whatever my true self is, whatever my ego is, it's all kind of one ball of bald white guy, right? It's all the same person, right? And I felt like, man, if I allow my ego in to just be a part of me, not to dominate, but just to be a part of me as if, like everything else, like that's how I unlock and become the best version of myself. Like, is the distance of the ego or accepting the ego a big piece that I don't know, come to terms with?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of parts, right? We have a lot of different facets. Everybody does. And any time we deny a certain part, especially one that we deem not so good, I don't like putting labels on things, but you know, we keep it away, it's usually yelling at us louder and louder every time because we can't know. It's like burying sorrow. Well, you can't know joy if you don't know sorrow, and vice
Mm.
versa. So to become friends with your ego and to say, like, it's okay, we don't have to be scared here, because part of our ego's job is to protect us, innate, it just innately, and it doesn't necessarily like change, especially if there's a lot of unknown attached to it, right? Like, where's the control in that? And we have no idea. So to be able to integrate the pieces that you find and to say, okay, how can I be friends with you? I see that, yes, it just strengthens the awareness so much in someone when we allow those things in and we look at it and we analyze it and we research it within ourselves. It's akin to an experiment, right? So, oh, do I like this kind of ice cream? No, let me try this kind of ice cream. And so with the parts of our ego, it's as if we're like, okay, this part is healthy. This confidence is healthy.
Yeah.
This integrity is healthy. This cockiness or arrogance, not so healthy. And so, how can I shift or say, okay, we're going to go about it a different way. We're going to look at how can I be confident, have faith in myself, trust myself, and how does it look different than arrogance that comes out when you like come in and say, I'm the protector and da da da, right? That's a little different than I love you so much. I want to protect you. How would you like to be protected?
Yeah.
As opposed to, I know all about you,
The,
right? Because we're
yeah.
the only experts on ourselves. Like I
Yeah.
can't tell you, right? Like this is how you should live your life, and I know all about you after talking to you a few times and having you fill out a few questionnaires, right? Because you're the expert on yourself.
Sure.
And so then it's a huge thing to become a participant in your own healing because yes, you're the main focus and you can be the main focus without putting all the spotlights on you and things like that. So to integrate the ego and to then work with it and to say, okay, this part I can't deny any more of this. I'm going to let it come in and I'm going to be discerning and I'm going to know, oh, oh yeah, okay, now that I'm aware that this is the ego talking and maybe I've hurt someone's feelings, I can go back and say, "Hey, I'm sorry about that." Because that's where the integrity comes in. Does that make sense?
It
It's
does. And I was going to add, yes, the cockiness, the arrogance, I feel like that comes out under stress, right?
yes.
Like that's right.
Mhm.
So my question would be if in my situation, I was holding the ego at a distance versus kind of allowing it,
Mhm.
does and there's a secondary question to this. I'll try to figure out how to ask most effectively, but does keeping my ego in check in my mind, or at least I thought I was, right? Keeping it
Mhm.
over there versus accepting it, does either or create the likelihood of coming across cocky and arrogant? In other words, if I keep the ego over there, am I more likely to have an arrogance or cockiness about me under stress? Or if I allow the ego in, or does it not matter? Does the ego just manifest those two things, whether you're accepting of it or you're kind of like I was, keeping it at bay?
Well, yes, it can in both instances like crop up, right? Especially in signs of stress, especially when we're triggered by some trauma. It's like, no, no, we have to be big, we have to be strong, right?
Yeah.
But when we allow it in and we don't keep it at bay, then we're able to work with it. Then we're able to, for lack of a better description, have conversations with it and have an awareness about, oh, why did that come out? Oh, because I was afraid of such and such and such and such. Okay, let's have that discussion. Let's see. Oh, what is that related to? Oh, I remember when my dad blah 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 blah. And so it's just, and it happens faster than it sounds like I'm explaining it, but when you keep it at bay, it wants to keep knocking, right? Much like during your experience, it
100%.
was
Yeah.
like, I'm just getting louder, I don't know, and heavier. So are you going to look at me or not? Because here I am.
Yeah.
And
It
and
was
it's part of
instant. It was ridiculous. It was
yeah.
instant. So I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, no. No, and it's part of us and it's about those shadow pieces. We can't have the light without the dark.
Yeah.
And we can relate different to the dark. We can turn it a little lighter. We can react with it a little lighter. We can explain to ourselves and others, like, hey, this is sorry I jumped on you. I had a bad day, or, it's just an old thing coming up and I'm working on it. So it's humbling, but in a way that is empowering, if
Yeah.
that makes
It
sense.
does. It does. It is funny how you said that, how when you keep it in check, like I don't know what I expected going into the experience. I know what the intention was. I want to see what's blocking me. I honestly, I can't even explain maybe what I thought it would be. But like in an instant, as soon as I went into an altered state, it was like, hey, mother effer, like here I am. Like, whoa, who are you? Like, I'm
Yeah.
what you came here to see. Like, no, you're not. I came here to see this beautiful light, this great version of me that's talking to St. Peter about this amazing life I created for myself. Like, that's what I came here to see, not you. Who the hell are you? So
Right.
it's funny you say that. And the second question that I was thinking of, and I think I mentioned this to you, it might have been very briefly. And I mentioned to a few other people, but I thought about other people in this. I thought about like Kanye West. I think about egotistical people, as we dub them, right? People that are considered to be egotistical. So like Kanye West, and now even like Will Smith and the slap and all that stuff. And
Mm, yeah.
you're not doing any of this. You're not working with them, and this is more
Mhm.
just maybe examples that are popular. But the thing that came to me, and I don't know, was, man, I look at like a Kanye West, who we all associate with being very cocky and arrogant and egotistical and
Mhm.
all that stuff. And I don't know him. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. He certainly has the image of being. But I felt like the difference, if you will,
Mhm.
there are a lot of differences between he and I, but one of the differences is he does allow himself to have an ego. He allows himself
Mhm.
like, yeah, I have an ego and my ego X, Y, and Z. And that allows him to ride that ego so close to himself that he can produce significant results in some way, right? Like his music, for people, it serves them, and he's
Mhm.
compensated wildly for that, his clothing
Mhm.
line, whatever. But when the ego is that close, when you allow the ego to be so much of you, it can hurt, like jumping up on stage when Taylor Swift accepts an award. And I don't know if he ever apologized or didn't, and that might be where he crosses a line in many cases.
Mhm.
But I felt like that was an example of, the best version of you, if you will, being part of what he's done. I mean, he's created an incredible brand and life for himself by allowing himself to have an ego.
Mhm.
The other one is Will Smith. So Will Smith, another guy who has an ego, obviously, he's allowed in that. He's produced significant results, and people are entertained by his music and his movies and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But that ego can hurt when you ride it that close. And it did in the case of the slap, and he immediately apologized and everything. And I took that as a sincere thing.
Mhm.
Am I interpreting that in your mind? Am I interpreting that embracing of the ego and what it can do when you do, but
Mhm.
understand that you're riding it really close? And when you do that, you're allowing and saying, hey, I understand from time to time that if I'm going to not keep this ego 12 feet away from me, but bring it right in, come on in, brother. You're part of me,
Mhm.
right? It's going to hurt sometimes. Not you, but it's going to hurt you by hurting others at times.
Mhm.
And allowing for that is part and parcel, maybe, of my intention of, hey, I might hurt sometimes. I got to know that could happen and do the right thing when it does. But for me to be the best version of myself, I need to have it here. I need to have it in a place where
Sure.
not control keeping it away, but control it from overstepping. Is that
Yes.
fair?
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, it is a fine line with the two example, especially with the two examples that you just gave. And I think also what seems to happen, especially with both those examples, is there are woundings here in play as well. And so, and not just, and woundings of the ego and woundings of their childhood, which damages the ego, because our ego to survive sometimes has to do that, right? Like you don't get to do that to me and blah blah blah, right? Especially once they get older, whatever they survived, and it becomes then just this protective shield all the time. And then there's that piece where it's like, well, because of my experiences, look at all that I could accomplish because I'm resilient, I'm smart, I had to be resourceful, and all these things. And so that's the empowerment piece. When that line gets crossed, I think sometimes it's when people get triggered, when the stress is really high, because that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
He could have easily, like Will Smith could have easily, or not so easily, right, been like, all right, I'm going to take a breath. I see my wife's reaction. I'm going to go to her and say, are you okay? But there's a lot of dynamics in that marriage too,
Sure.
but in a perfect world, right? And so, are you okay? I see that hurt your feelings, and the acknowledgement for that, as opposed to, I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna smack somebody, right? To show that you can't push who I love around, right? So although the intention behind it was I love my family, I love my wife, you can't say that to her. The action was very primitive and very reactionary,
Word. Yeah.
right? As opposed to let me take a moment and be humble in this moment,
Mm.
right? And say, my first priority is my wife, not to go up and smack somebody. Um, and again, I don't know all the ins and outs of their marriage either, but I think that's where the fine line comes in, where when you know that that's there, because a lot of people aren't aware, but doing the work that you did allows you to see it quite clearly. You're able to go, oh, is this ego right now? Is this thought right now so much ego? Can I take a moment and breathe so that I don't get up and punch somebody? Or right, or
Right.
say
Yeah.
something that's gonna, just destroy the person. Is it congruent? Right, is my reaction initially congruent to what actually happened?
Mm.
Right, because in that example with Will Smith, it's not congruent. It was essentially, right.
Yeah.
And that's
Words in
why he,
exchange for, yeah.
exactly, and that's why he can go back and apologize, and I mean that's a good thing that he did that. And that's where the humility comes in, albeit just a little bit late, but then he can step back and go, oh wow, that wasn't cool, so
Yeah.
I need to apologize, and whatever happens then, whatever kind of makeup or whatever is going to happen or not. But that line, I think, there's a the humbleness kind of keeps that line. And as soon as we go, oh no, I'm bigger and better than all of it. And so now I'm going to go after it. Whatever it is that harmed, whatever it is that I want, whatever it is that I think. Because there are so many ways to communicate things, even with only 170,000 words,
Right. Right.
right? That we can get our point across without getting huge and big and overpowering.
Makes
It's
sense.
less a power over than an empowerment
Yeah.
or a
No,
power
completely agree.
with.
Man, that makes so much sense. I'm curious, because there's books written about this. So there's a book, I think, called like Death to the Ego. And it's funny,
Mhm,
like after I went through this experience, I felt like, man, that feels wrong to me. Death to the
mhm,
ego.
mhm,
Maybe I'm wrong though. So I'm curious, like it feels more like accept the ego, accept you have one, embrace your ego. Where, how do you stand on that? Which, if you were coaching me on that, is
mhm.
it death to the ego? Ego is bad, get rid of it, or no, embrace the ego. Like like I'm struggling with the concept because a lot of smart people will say, ah, that's your ego. You gotta put that down. You got to, it's like, okay, that's smart people. People that I feel are high performers. They're
Mhm.
enlightened in some ways. They've gone through these experiences. They have, full awareness, not just some tagline. But what is the right, in your opinion, what is the right way to say to the ego, death to the ego, keep your ego in check, embrace your ego? Like, what's the right thing there? Because I'm struggling a bit with that concept.
Yeah, I used to be like 100% ego death is great. Like you then form and you level up and do all the different things. And at the same time, we also need our ego. So I think what happens or can happen in an ego death per se is that, okay, I've seen the humbleness that I probably would be best to enact, as opposed to, you know, going full force and being within, all full of myself and whatever. Because that's what people think when ego, but what I've seen over the years now is that, it's been given a little bit of a bad rap because there is that protective quality. There is that confidence piece that people can mistake for ego, right? There is, because even growing up, I was an elite athlete, and everyone would remind me, don't be cocky, don't be cocky, don't be cocky, don't be arrogant, don't be
Right,
arrogant.
right, right.
But then you collapse into yourself.
Yeah.
You don't allow yourself at all to enjoy any of the accolades that you receive, and you miss out. So being able to navigate your ego to be like, yeah, I did a good job, and just really own that. It's similar to pride, right? Everyone thinks pride, oh, seven deadly sins, but pride can also be this just amazing and huge love for what you do and for who you are, and not like I'm better than you. And so for me, that they kind of walk, I didn't understand what pride was because I kept being told you can't be that way, you know? And I had my own innate kind of thing, but I also missed out on a lot. So I think, having that ego and that relationship with it is better than death to the ego. You're not going to kill the ego. I really don't. I really believe that. Like you can't kill it because again, some of it's here for protective purposes, in my experience. Some of it's here to like give you a boost when you need a boost, right? And some of it can be detrimental, yes. Some of it can be, I want power over you and I'm better than you, so you better move out of the way, which is not great.
That's all the way around though, right? Like even as somebody who's humble, humility can also be being taken advantage of. You can be a little
Yes.
overly humble, right? And people walk all over you, and it shouldn't happen. So there's really no like version of you that is the one you should run toward. It's managing all aspects and embracing that you are.
Yep, it's the
Yeah.
balance of it all,
Yeah.
right? Because you do need confidence, a certain air of confidence to walk through life.
Yeah.
A belief in yourself, right? A belief in who you are. A belief in like, oh, my truest self. Oh, I can get there. I can meet that place. And the ego, when you have a relationship with it, I believe will kind of move out of the way for that loving kindness to come in, or that piece of communication that you need, even when you're hurting, that you need to communicate. It will come in if you allow it, if you have made friends with it, if you because otherwise it's still going to fight, much like it was doing. Hello, hello,
Yeah.
we're here, and then that distracts you from everything else,
Yeah.
right? And
Wow.
all you can look at is that piece.
Amazing. All right. Well, we're butting up against an hour here, and I want to make sure I respect your time. The My wife and I are going through your integration workshop, I guess I would call it, right? Healing through constellation.
Hmm.
In a few weeks here, we both see an extreme value in going through this. And it's funny, I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder where people are as they listen to this episode, if this is an intro to this whole world, or if it is something they've been thinking about or exploring, or something that they've gone through, and it offers perspective on it. But I've had enough people ask about my experience that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go on and bring in the person that helped me integrate and say, hey, let's just walk through this, and hopefully it adds value to a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um, but where can people learn more about what you do? What's the, somebody goes through this experience or is planning to go through this, and they want to, kind of integrate those learnings into life with you. How would they find out more about you and what you're doing?
So my website's the easiest. It's constellationhealingarts.com. And it has like all you need to know about what I do. And then there's also a way to contact me through there, and even a way to schedule some things as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
100%. Great
yeah.
site, lots of great info, and I learned so much from just going through, the post experience with you, and getting, a lot of what we talked about now, and some other stuff that I know we didn't touch on that I have to go back to my notes on. But I appreciate you coming on. I really do. This was so helpful to me, and I hope it helps others. And yeah, I'll see you. I'll see you at the workshop.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I
Excellent.
loved every moment of it. Thank you.
Thanks again.